Hey guys, thanks for the click. Today I'm going to be cutting out a large sign that is double the size of my laser bed in one direction. I'll be using two features in Lightburn. One is cut shapes and the other is print and cut. And yes, this piece of material will be sticking out of the laser during the cut. So with that said, let's go ahead and get on with this project. Let's go. I started off by opening the lid to the Mirror 7. I grabbed the front panel key and I unlocked it and opened the door. I next lowered the laser bed so I could safely slide in the large piece of Baltic birch plywood. I then placed two high-powered magnets on both sides so it could hold down my material. Next, I went to the controller, I went down to autofocus and I autofocused the laser to my material. Okay, now that I've loaded the material into the Mirror 7, I've imported the sign design into the Lightburn software. And as you can quickly notice, the sign design is way bigger than the laser bed in one direction. And without modifying this file, the Mirror 7 will not be able to frame it, nor will it be able to cut it out in one job. However, there are a few features in Lightburn that will allow me to modify my large sign design and cut out the large sign in two steps. The first feature is the cut shapes. This feature will allow me to cut my big sign design in half and create two separate segments, the top segment and the bottom segment, that will easily fit onto the laser bed. And the second feature is the print and cut. This feature will allow me to assign registration marks or targets to each segment. Each segment will share the same registration marks, and these marks will align the two segments and tell the laser where to cut. Okay, now I'm going to show you the steps that I take to cut this sign into two equal parts so that each part fits onto the laser bed comfortably. So the first thing I need to know is how high my sign is. So I select my sign and I look up here to the upper left corner of Lightburn and I look at the width and the height. And I see here that the height is 27 inches high. So 27 inches divided by 2 is 13.5 inches. So I want to cut this sign into two equal parts that are 13.5 inches high. So the way I do that is I'm going to go ahead and select my rectangle tool, and I'm going to create a rectangle that's a little bit wider than the sign. So that looks good right about there. And now when I select the sign, I want to resize it to 13.5 inches tall. So I come back up here to the width and the height. I make sure that the lock is unlocked because I only want to change one value at a time. And I highlight the height and I change that to 13.5 inches. So now the box just changed from what it was to 13.5 inches. So now what I want to do is I want to drag this top line of the newly created rectangle and I want to drag it down to the top line of the sign. So let me zoom in a bit, drag it down. So now I'm going to hover over this line with the cursor until it changes to a circle with crosshairs. And then I'm going to slowly drag it down. And this line is going to snap on to the top line of the sign. Alright, so I keep dragging slowly and bam, you see that? Bam. Right there, it snapped onto the top line. So now I know that this top portion of the sign is 13.5 inches and this bottom of the sign should be 13.5 inches as well. Okay, to test that out, let me go ahead and select the rectangle that I just made and I'm going to duplicate it. Once it's duplicated, I'm going to grab it from the top left corner and I'm going to snap it onto the bottom of the top rectangle. So I'm going to have two rectangles right on top of each other and they both should be 13.5 inches. And if you look at it now, the two rectangles are the exact same height as our sign. And we can conclude that this blue line here is the halfway point of our sign. So we don't need this bottom rectangle anymore, so I can delete it. And let's go ahead and now make our registration marks, okay? So let me go ahead and move everything over and I'm going to grab my circle tool and I'm going to hit shift and I'm going to make a circle. But this circle is a little bit too big. I want this circle to be a 1/2 inch in diameter. So I select the circle and I move back up to the width and height in the upper left corner of Lightburn, and this time I'm going to lock the aspect ratio lock so that it changes both values at the same time. So I highlight the width and I change it to 0.5 inches. That changes the size of the circle to a ½ inch. So now that we have this circle to be a ½ inch, I'm going to zoom in on it a bit. And now what we need to do is make crosshairs so that we can have a center point to this circle. So I'm going to select the line, the pencil tool or the line tool, and I'm going to hover my cursor over the top of the circle. And once it turns into a circle with crosshairs, it has found the top center portion of the circle. So I hit Shift, double click, and now I drag down until it locks into place, and I double click and I hit escape. Okay, so now I have a line here that has separated this circle into 2 equal parts. So now I simply select the line, and I'm going to go ahead and duplicate it, and I'm going to go to Arrange and Rotate 90 degrees clockwise. Okay, so now I have a really nice little fancy crosshair or target. I think it looks really nice. So what I want to do next is let's go ahead and select it all, and let's go ahead and group it. And now that we grouped it, let's go ahead and change the color to a bright magenta or number 7. Okay, so now our crosshair is prepared. So now we have to position this crosshair onto the halfway line of our sign. Okay, so now I'm going to move my crosshair and I'm going to center it onto the bottom of the rectangle. And when it gets there, it's going to snap into place. And I'm going to zoom in a bit, and I want to drag it over until it kisses the sign. So let me drag it over, bam, right there. It has kissed the sign. So it's kissing the sign and it is aligned on the halfway point on the blue line. Okay, so now I want to get this registration mark, and I want to do the same thing on the other side. So I'm simply just going to select the crosshair. I'm going to duplicate it, and I'm simply going to hit the left arrow key and start to move it over until it goes to the other side. So let me go ahead and move it over, and I'm going to continue to hit the left arrow, and we get it about there, and then I'll zoom in so you can see. Okay, now I'm going to grab it and I'm going to slide it over until it kisses the sign. So this crosshair is centered on the halfway line, and it's also kissing the sign just like it is on the other side. So we're almost done with this. Just a few more steps and we'll cut this sign in half. Okay, so now it's time to cut the sign in half. So what I'm going to do is this top rectangle is going to be my cookie cutter, and this is what's going to cut the sign in half. So since I don't want the top line of the sign to be cut, I'm going to drag the rectangle up a little bit so that it doesn't cut this top line off. Just remember, this rectangle is like a cookie cutter. Anything the edges touch, it's going to cut it. So if I move the rectangle to this position, it would cut the sign into 3 pieces. And that's not what I want. I just want the halfway point to be cut, and that's this line right here. Okay, so now in order to cut this, you have to do 2 simple things. You have to select the sign and then hit the Shift key and select the rectangle or the cookie cutter. And once those 2 are selected, you go to Tools and click on Cut Shapes. And you'll notice at the bottom of the sign is highlighted, and that's just indicating that the sign has been cut in 2 pieces. So now I'll grab the bottom of the sign and I'll pull it away from the top sign. And this is a good visual to see how the sign now is in 2 pieces. Okay, here's what we're going to do next. Let's go ahead and hit Ctrl-Z to return the bottom piece back to the top piece. Okay, let's go ahead and select both of the registration marks, and let's go ahead and group them together just like that. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the registration marks. I'm going to hit Shift. I'm going to select the top part of the sign and I'm going to say copy. And once I hit copy, I want to paste it. So let's go ahead and paste it. And let's paste it on the other side just for demonstration. And I'm going to move it over here. So right here, once we copied it over, let's go ahead and select it all and make sure it's grouped. Bam, now it's grouped. So this here is the top portion of the sign. So now let's go back over to the other side and let's do the same thing. Let's go ahead and select the registration marks and hit Shift. And now we'll select the bottom of the sign and we'll hit copy and we'll zoom out a bit and we'll hit paste. And now we'll paste and move this guy over here. Let's select the crosshairs and the bottom of the sign and let's hit group. Okay, I'm done modifying my sign design. I have successfully cut the sign into two separate pieces. The top of the sign that I will load separately into the Mirror 7 and the bottom of the sign that I will load separately into the Mirror 7. And they both share identical registration marks. And these registration marks will be what the laser uses to line up both portions of the sign. For example, when I line up the registration marks directly on top of the other registration marks, it perfectly lines up the sign design. Now, if these registration marks were not perfectly aligned, like in this example, you will notice that the patterns on the top and the bottom are now misaligned. That is why it will be very important to line up the laser pointer to the exact center of the crosshair, and this will guarantee perfect alignment of both sides. I'll show you that when we get to the print and cut step. Now the next thing I did is I selected the top part of the sign and I saved it to a file location and I named it something like top. Then I selected and saved the bottom part to a file location and I named it something like bottom. Okay guys, I went ahead and loaded the top part of the sign into the laser. I centered my design onto the laser bed, and now let me take a quick look at the layers. I have the purple layer, which is going to be the registration marks, and those are purple, and those are going to be scored, followed by the scoring of the letters, circles, and shapes. I won't be engraving Lucy because you can see she's not there anymore, and it's going to end with me cutting the sign, and then we'll take the sign out, turn it and rotate it 180 degrees and we'll get going. Let's go. Okay, now that the top portion of this sign has been loaded into the Mirror 7, let's go ahead and hit frame and ensure that the bottom portion of this sign is resting on the halfway point of our material. You'll notice that I made a pencil mark on the left side of the laser bed. This mark shows the halfway measurement of my material, and I want the bottom of the top segment to rest on this line. You may have to reposition your sign in Lightburn a few times until it frames where you want it to, but this is framing where I want it to, so let's go ahead and go on to the next step. Before I close the lid to the laser, I place a piece of 1/2 inch thick trim over the opening of the laser. This will allow the door to rest on the trim piece and not the material. Resting it on the material will put upwards pressure on the plywood and could cause problems. So I hit the start button and the laser scores the left registration mark. Then it travels to the other side to score the registration mark on the right side. The Mirror 7 will now continue to score all the letters and shapes on the top part of the sign, where I will later place acrylic pieces. When done, it starts to cut out all the inner pieces, followed by cutting the perimeter of the sign. You'll notice that the perimeter cut line is kissing the registration mark just like it did in Lightburn. When done, I open the lid to the laser and I carefully remove the sign from the laser bed. I place it aside and I remove all the small pieces off of the laser bed. I then grab the sign and I rotate it 180 degrees and I carefully place it back onto the laser bed, securing it down with 2 high-powered magnets. Okay, now that the material is rotated and loaded, I am back at the Lightburn program. And since I rotated the physical sign 180 degrees, I must also rotate the sign in Lightburn 180 degrees. So now I select the sign, then I click on Arrange, then I click on Rotate 90 degrees clockwise, followed by clicking on 90 degrees clockwise again. The sign now is in the same orientation as the sign on the laser bed. So on this job, I do not want to rescore the registration mark, so I will turn off the output to this layer. The only two tasks the laser will perform is the scoring of all the letters and symbols, followed by cutting the rest of the sign out. So now it's time to use the print and cut feature to line up the bottom of the sign with the top of the sign. So let's go ahead and do this. The first thing you want to do is you want to go to the laser and move the laser head or the laser pointer to the left registration mark area. It doesn't really matter which one you select first. I just happen to choose the left registration mark first. So now you want to move the laser pointer to the center of the crosshair. You will have to slow down the jog speed in order to do this easily. So I go to the controller and I press speed. Once there, I want to change the value from 300 millimeters per second down to 1 millimeter per second. And then I press enter. Once you set this, you can now easily move the laser pointer to the center of the crosshair on the registration marks. Now remember, take your time and slowly move the laser pointer until it is precisely positioned on the center of the crosshair. The more precise you are, the better your alignment will be. So now that I'm satisfied with the position of the laser pointer, let me go back to Lightburn. Okay, now that I have precisely moved the laser pointer to the center of the registration mark's crosshair, I want to select the left registration mark. But first, make sure to ungroup it. Once ungrouped, select the left registration mark. Now that it's selected, I will move up to Laser Tools and I'll select and click on Print and Cut. I'll then move my cursor and I'll click on Set First Target Position. And when I click it, you'll see that there is now a red circle around the registration mark. That means that I have successfully set the first target position. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to jog the laser head over to the right registration mark area. Once there, I come back to Lightburn and I select the right registration mark. Now I move back to the laser, I slow down the jog speed again to 1 millimeter per second, and I slowly and precisely move the laser pointer to the center of the crosshair. And remember, the more on target you are with lining up the pointer to the crosshair, the better the top and bottom sign alignment will be overall. Okay, I'm on target here, so let's go back to Lightburn. Okay, now that I've centered the laser pointer onto the crosshair at the laser, I'll now go up to Laser Tools and I'll click on Print and Cut. Once there, I will click on Set Second Target Position. After clicking it, you will notice that it made a blue circle around the right registration mark. This is indicating that the second target position is set. Okay, we're almost done. There is only one more thing to do in the Print and Cut feature. I have to go back up to Laser Tools, click on Print and Cut, then I have to select and click on Align the output to the targets. After clicking, you will see that both target positions now have a green circle around them. That means that both targets are now set in Lightburn, and we are now ready to send this job to the laser. So now all I have to do is click on Send. I've named this file Bottom, and now I send it off to the laser. Once loaded in the laser, I will click on Frame to see how well the bottom of the sign is lining up with the top of the sign. With the jog speed being set a little too high, it's really hard to get a good look. So I'm going to go ahead and slow down the jog speed and click on Frame again and take a better look this time. Okay, let's go. And now with the slower jog speed, you can see how the laser pointer is nicely framing this job. It kisses the edge of the registration mark, and it also kisses the end cuts from the top of the sign. This is lining up pretty darn good. You can see it here kissing the end cuts of some of the symbols on the top of the sign. So I am pretty confident that this is going to line up perfectly. So let's go ahead and continue. I reposition the piece of 1/2 inch trim over the laser opening, and I close the door and I press start to begin this print and cut job. And as programmed, it begins by scoring all the letters and shapes. I'm very pleased to see the scoring is lining up perfectly with the scoring from the top of the sign. this print and cut feature is pretty awesome. And here's Lucy enjoying the cut. I continue to monitor this job and inspect all the locations where the two parts are connected. The print and cut is doing a perfect job cutting these areas. In the next few seconds, it will show good examples of where the two patterns connect and how the laser aligns them is right on the mark and cuts them out. And here we come to the end cut, and you'll see how the laser beam is cutting right along the line and it kisses the registration mark, just like I thought it would. I open up the lid to the laser, remove the 1/2 inch spacer trim piece, and I inspect the sign. With everything looking good, I begin to remove the high-powered magnets and I begin to remove the sign from the laser bed. And there you go, guys, I did it. I cut out a sign that is twice the size of my laser bed in one direction using the print and cut feature. And using the same steps, I cut out a 1/4 inch piece of plywood to use as a sign backing. And here's my finished large sign. And after cutting out and adding acrylic pieces to this sign, I think it came out pretty nice. So that's going to go ahead and wrap up this video. I hope that I was able to teach you a thing or two when it comes to cut shapes and print and cut. It's really not that hard. And I love that I can now offer larger signs to my customers. Do me a favor and please like and subscribe to my channel. I would greatly appreciate it. So until my next video, if it happens in my world or the Mira 7, I will definitely try to make a video of it. So have a great day and see you next time. Adios.